So welcome to this Photoshop tutorial. Today I want to look at two different things in Photoshop. So first of all, how to use curves, and then we're going to use those curves and we're going to create an action from that. So we're going to use curves, create two curves, one for the shadows, one for the highlights, and we're going to do it in a way that we can automate it through actions. So if you don't know what actions are in Photoshop, you're going to find out. But if you've ever used macros in Excel, for instance, they're a little bit like that, but so they allow you to automate your workflow inside Photoshop. So the first thing we want to do, we want to create an action. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna straight away create an action. So before I start doing this, so we want to record what we're doing. So quite often when you open up the actions panel here, if you don't see it here in your sidebar, you'll always find it up here in window and then actions. So yeah, the first thing you'll notice is you've got these buttons and you don't have an opportunity to do anything with them, or it's just these buttons that you can click on. So with the actions, there's two different modes. There's the create mode and there's button mode. At the moment, button mode is turned on, so you can't do anything with the creating new actions or editing actions. But once we uncheck that, we shift over to the create mode. And from here, we can create a new action. So these are all our actions here. I'm going to create a new one. So we're going to start at the most important thing when you start recording your action is that you only do things related to that action. Okay, so we'll start recording our action. I'm going to record every step that I make inside Photoshop. So I'm going to hit on this little plus with the square in it to create my new action. I'm going to call this exposure because that's what we're creating it for, to help with the exposure of the image. You can put it into the default actions group, which you can see here at the top, or you can have a new group created if you want to. You create new groups down here to this folder. So if you want to add it, then you should do it before, create the new group before you, or the new set as it's called, before you create the action. But we're going to leave it in the default actions. You can assign a function key, so anything from F2 to F12. Be careful you haven't assigned a key for something else. If you have, of course, you can also, so for this we could have Shift F2 could be the function key. And you can also assign it a color so that in button mode it looks more, it stands out more from the other one. So you can give it, for instance, a blue color. I'm going to hit record. So now you note that the record button is turned red, so it's recording everything I do in Photoshop. Any action I make in Photoshop will be recorded. So the first thing we want to do is we need to get a selection of all the shadows or highlights for this image to then create our curves adjustment layer. And that selection, then when we create our curves adjustment layer, it will create a mask with it. So if I go to my channels tab here, next to the layers panel, so I click on channels and I hold down my control key over RGB, you'll see a little square box popping up over the finger, the hand. I click on that once, that automatically selects all my highlights. So now all my highlights are selected. If we look at the histogram, if you can think of it as pretty much everything to the right of the histogram, so the bright tones are selected. So from this I can go back to my layers and I'm going to go down to the flyout panel, not through the menus but through the flyout panel, and create my curve. So it automatically now created my curve. And as you can see here, we have, it's our highlight tones in this area here. So I'm going to just double click on where it says curves 1 and call this one H for highlights and hit enter. So now we have our highlights one. Now all we need to do is we just have to duplicate this layer. So we can do that by either dragging it to the new layer icon or going up to the layer menu and just going duplicate layer. We can call this one S, click on OK, and then we can invert. We need to invert this mask. So I'm going to do Control I to invert, so now that's the shadows. So now we have a shadow and a highlight curve mask. We can go ahead and put them in a group. So I'm going to select both of them, holding on the Shift key, click once, click twice to select both, and place them inside a group. Control G on the keyboard. And I can call that group Exposure. So that's my 2 adjustment layers with their masks, one for the shadows, one for the highlights, created through my actions. So if I go back to my actions window now, we can see here under my exposure action all the different things that were done. We have a couple of extra actions in here where I was messing around selecting stuff, but that's fine. We can leave it. We can stop this action now. It's recorded. We can go back to button mode. So click on the flyout menu of the actions panel, click on button mode. Now I'm just gonna delete this group here and test my action. So I'm going to click on exposure, and voila, that's it done. It's ready. So we now have our action, and this can be applied to any image at all. So it's flexible. You can also apply it to multiple images in batches. You can create a droplet in Photoshop to drop a folder on or an image on, and I will again automatically add this to any of the images in that folder. So inside this now, so if we double click here, I can independently now brighten up my shadows without affecting my highlights, and I can dim down my highlights if I wish so. So it allows you to independently change them and in a non-destructive way, which is important. Photoshop does have a way through the image adjustments menu of changing the shadow highlight, but that is a destructive adjustment. Normally when we're making adjustments to our images, we try to keep them as non-destructive adjustments, and that's what this is, and this sets it up quite nicely so that we can adjust our shadow and highlight separately. If you like the video, hit like. If you have anything else to comment or add, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you and bye.